Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to just let folks filter into the webinar space. So we'll kick things off here in just about a minute, but we've got folks slowly coming in, so we'll let everyone arrive before we formally begin. All right. Well, good evening and welcome. My name is Carrie McWilliams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Gap Year Association and the moderator for this evening's panel discussion titled Explore the Gap Year, Low Cost and Affordable Gap Year Options. On behalf of the Gap Year Association, I want to thank you all for joining us. Every October, the Gap Year community comes together to connect and amplify the growing Gap Year movement through Gap Year Exploration Month. And to conclude this year's Gap Year Exploration Month, we're thrilled to have a panel of experts joining us this evening to discuss low-cost Gap Year options. So before I introduce this evening's panelists, I'd like to first provide a brief introduction to the Gap Year Association, otherwise known as GYA. GYA is the only national nonprofit working to coordinate the growing Gap Year movement. We're recognized by the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Federal Trade Commission as the Standards Development Organization for Gap Year Education, which means that we provide a robust accreditation process for both Gap Year consultants as well as Gap Year program providers. Our overall mission as a nonprofit is to advance the Gap Year movement through standards of best practice, professional development, research, resources, and advocacy, with the ultimate goal of empowering more people to access transformative Gap Year experiences. So you'll notice that tonight's discussion is being hosted as a webinar, which means that only our panelists' video and audio will be available. However, the Q&A chat and the general chat will remain open for you all as audience members throughout the program tonight. So we encourage you to submit questions. If we have other Gap Year consultants, Gap Year program providers on the call, and you have resources that you think would be helpful for this conversation, please feel free to drop them in the chat so everyone can benefit from that knowledge and those resources. And we'll address as many questions as possible during our Q&A at the end of tonight's session and during the last 10 minutes or so. And if we aren't able to get to every question, we'll certainly try our best to provide a written response, and you'll find those responses as well as a copy of this recording on the GYA Financial Aid website page. And we'll provide a link and access to that for you all as well. So moving on to tonight's discussion topic, an overview of low-cost and affordable Gap Year options. We often in the Gap Year space encounter the myth that Gap Year experiences are only reserved for very wealthy individuals, those who have the resources to fund extensive travel and who have the luxury of taking a break from school or work in order to pursue those opportunities. And unfortunately, this is a bit of an antiquated perspective that does a disservice to those prospective Gap Year students who are seeking affordable ways of pursuing a Gap Year experience and gaining the many documented benefits of meaningful Gap Year time. And while it's true that certainly some Gap Year experiences come with a high price tag, there remains a wide range of different options to those seeking Gap Year experiences, including local and domestic options that incur fewer travel costs, income generating options like national service and work exchange. And there's also a great abundance of a variety of different financial aid opportunities. So at the Gap Year Association, we define a gap year as an intentional period of time devoted to personal growth and exploration through experiential learning opportunities. And a meaningful gap year is a valuable opportunity for developing one's own personal identity, for clarifying a sense of purpose, and helping to expand one's skill set, all of which can be achieved in a number of different ways, at a number of different price points, and at various periods of time in one's life. Often it's most traditional in the Gap Year space for those students who are pursuing one of these opportunities right after high school and pre-college or career. But gap time can also be during college or even post-college between graduate school or career. So this evening, our panelists will discuss some valuable resources for those looking to reduce the costs associated with intentional gap time. And while an hour certainly isn't enough time to cover this topic in great detail, we hope the conversation will at least deliver some helpful starting points for understanding the vast landscape for gap year possibilities and help to guide your thinking around both the general value and accessibility of gap year experiences. So with all of that context, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for this evening's discussion. Joining us tonight is Elisabet Raquel García, who is a Gen Z global education DIA specialist and content creator, who is a first-generation, low-income, turned four-time scholar abroad, now on a mission to support historically underserved students. Her time abroad included a year's worth of gap time that helped launch her own international education consulting business called Access Equitable Education. So welcome, Elisabet. We also have Heather Dirck from AmeriCorps NCCC, where she serves as a community relations specialist. NCCC stands for the National Civilian Community Corps, which is a full-time residential AmeriCorps service program that engages adults ages 18 to 26 in national and community service across the United States. And NCCC aims to strengthen communities and develop leaders through direct team-based national and community service work. And finally, we have Katherine Stievater joining us, who is a GYA accredited gap year consultant who founded Gap Year Solutions to help students increase college success through transformational gap year experiences. She works with students across the US to structure travel, internships, work, service, and other activities into a customized plan. Her approach focuses on student ownership and building life skills, such as problem solving, independent living, and resilience. So we're absolutely thrilled to have each of you joining us this evening. I also wanted, the other person on the screen is GYA's Associate Director, Mel Bizard, and she's going to help us through the question and answer period. So to kick things off, Elisabet, I'd like to direct the first question to you. As someone who identifies as an underrepresented student, specifically low income and first generation, who pursued a very purposeful gap year experience, can you tell us a bit more about why you felt it was both necessary and valuable for you to have a gap year opportunity?
Absolutely. And that is a really great question. So I would love to share with everybody here that I actually took two different gap experiences for a total of 1 year. And it was really awesome. The first gap experience that I took was right after college. I graduated in 2019 and I partook in a special heritage cultural immersion program funded by the Mexican government. I did that program and then I stayed for an extra 5 months just house sitting for a friend of my mentor at the study abroad office that I worked at. So I was there for 6 months total in Mexico, and it was the scholarship program was funded by the Mexican government, and I spent those extra 5 months just living there for free by house sitting. And the first time I took this gap experience, I really didn't know that it was a quote unquote gap experience. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't know I didn't know that's what it was called, what I was doing, right? All I knew was that I was graduating, I wasn't ready to go home, and I needed somewhere to be while I planned out my next steps. All that said, my time after graduation, my gap time, was very valuable to me. It provided me with an incredible opportunity to participate in this really awesome exchange program, to immerse myself in my own culture and make incredible friends with similar backgrounds to me, while being connected with government officials, company owners, community organizers, artists and artisans, and more, all throughout Mexico. And that was incredible. And then those following 5 months after, when I was kind of just house sitting and dog sitting, that was a period of deep reflection for me, deep reflection, deep healing, deep processing, but also a lot of writing and a lot of job applying as I was there to plan out my next steps. What did I want the rest of my life to look like? The rest of my life, what did I want my next steps in my life to look like after graduation? So I dreamed big, I applied for all the jobs and got no callbacks. So that was my first gap experience. And then my second gap experience, interestingly enough, came just after my first year in the professional working field. I finally landed a full-time job as a writer, really boring job, actually, just writing blogs all day about car accidents. And that was my full-time job. So my second gap experience came after my first year, working full time in the field, when I wanted to leave that miserable job that I had and make a pivot. I decided that I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship after I had gained so much experience being abroad. In addition to, having these two gap experiences, I also studied abroad 3 times during my undergrad, and my whole world kind of revolves around study abroad and international exchange programs. And something I'm very passionate about and want to continue doing. But again, I had spent those 5 months in Mexico applying to all those jobs in my field, and I got no callbacks. So I used the second time to take a gap experience to pivot and really I get my foot in the door into this field that didn't want to hire me traditionally. So I got creative and decided I would make my own way into the field. And I was able to do this because I ended up applying for the Gap Year Fairs, the Go Overseas Gap Year Fairs scholarship in 2021, and I won a $5,000 scholarship to do just this. I pitched that I wanted to build my own business in international education in supporting historically underserved students like me, gain more access and more equitable access to these programs, and they loved it. So I won those $5,000, and with that money, I took another 6 months off from working, and I quit my miserable full-time job, and I was able to leave my 2 other part-time jobs I was doing to make the transition. And it was great. I ended up enrolling in a course to learn about more sustainable entrepreneurship, and that was fantastic. That course was offered by Global Visions International, which is a gap program provider. And on top of that, I went back to that program with the Mexican government to gain on-site experience, international education, professional on-site in the field. And so that was really great. So that was the accumulation of my 2 gap experiences for a total of 1 year. That was broken up over, I think, 2 years. And I felt that it was really necessary because I needed that time and the space to process and think about what I wanted to do. So that was the first half of that experience, and the second half was really going for it and implementing it. So it was fantastic, and it was really valuable for me because without those gap experiences, I wouldn't be where I am now. Now I have my own business as a global education DEI specialist, just a fancy fake title I made up for myself, as an entrepreneur in this field, supporting historically underserved students like me. And yeah, I wouldn't be who I am today without these experiences. And they provided me with the time and the space and the place to really reflect and grow and think about what I wanted to do next and how to actually implement the next steps I needed to pursue it. Those are my experiences.
Thank you so much for sharing that, those personal experiences, Elisabet. In thinking about tonight's conversation, it was important to us that we deliver some ideas for folks. We have a lot of students on the call tonight, a lot of parents, high school counselors, a wide variety of audience of folks. And so we want to be sure that we're providing some actual, resources and definitive steps people can take for pursuing a more affordable gap year option. And in doing that, we also wanted to be sure that we're sharing the stories of people who have made it happen. And so you, as a gap year alum, reflect that. And so thank you for kind of helping folks understand what a gap experience can look like, because we know no single gap year experience for each individual looks the same. They're all different. So you shared a lot of, you know, independent experiences that you had, as well as more structured. And you mentioned a couple of resources that you received in terms of it being an exchange program and receiving scholarship funding. But I'm wondering if, from your experience as a gap year alum, if you could tell us a bit more about some of the key elements in your planning process. And in the context of this particular discussion, specifically, what sorts of financial aid opportunities? You mentioned the Go Overseas Scholarship, but any others that you might have that you'd like to share with the audience, and where and how you found those opportunities.
Absolutely. So I will say that I have been on site 7 programs now, and I've never paid for a program out of pocket. Never. So something that I do is I just apply to every single scholarship, every single fellowship, every single exchange program that is funded, and I usually get in, and it's been incredible. I've been all around the world on these. It's been amazing. Now, to your point, planning is so important, and gaining access to financial aid and resources is very helpful. You don't want to be like me. You don't want to graduate from college and have no plan about your gap year. I went to Mexico with just $500 for those 6 months. I had a scholarship from the Mexican government. They gave us $1,500. 1,000 was used towards the program and was left. I did some math and I said, okay, I can live off of $500 for 6 months in Mexico, and it was not a fun time. So definitely doing some financial planning and doing some research before you step into your gap year is highly advisable. Now, knowing what I do now as a professional in the field, I have 3 great places where I would direct students to find more, I guess, opportunity for financial aid and funding for these types of programs. And the first place I would recommend are programs funded by the U.S. Department of State. There are over 50 programs funded by the U.S. Department of State that are either fully funded or partially funded, and for people of all ages, everyone from high school students to people who are done with their doctoral programs. And some of the programs for high school students include the Congress Budistang Youth Exchange Program, the Future Leaders Exchange Abroad Program, Abroad Program, which is the Kennedy Lugar Youth Exchange and Study Abroad Program, and lastly, the Youth Ambassadors Program. And I see Mel went ahead and threw the link in the chat there. If you find more information about exchanges for high school students funded by the U.S. Department of State, you can find that there. The second link is to all 50 programs funded by the U.S. Department of State, and those include programs such as the Fulbright, Peace Corps, the Critical Language Scholarship, and more. I myself am a Benjamin A. Gill Scholar alumni, and I won another $5,000 to study abroad in Chile back when I was an undergrad, and it was incredible. So that is the first place I would recommend students. And if you don't find any programs that fit your criteria or interest of those different programs, another way to start looking into gap year programs would be looking at different sites that feature different programs offered by different companies. And a good place to begin this search, a website called gooverseas.com, which is kind of like the Yelp for gap year programs. These gap year programs are programs, or these, how do I say? These third-party provider gap year programs are programs that you typically have to pay out of pocket for. However, some of them might have their own scholarships or financial aid available. Additionally, like if you find a gap year program that you are interested in, you can apply for the Go Overseas Scholarship, which is what I won in 2021, and I won $5,000 from that towards my gap experience. But that was the second place prize. I believe when I won the first place prize was for $10,000. So that's the second place. Check out gooverseas.com. And lastly, if you don't think that gap time is viable through either of these options, if you don't find any programs that fit you through federally funded programs, or if you don't find any affordable year programs, a third option is to make gap time possible through an institution, and that's something called study abroad, which is kind of aligned with gap time, but it's not necessarily the same. I myself studied abroad 3 times during undergrad, and like I mentioned, I never paid out of pocket for these programs because as a first-gen low-income student, I had an excellent financial aid package, and luckily enough for me, my financial aid applied to my study abroad programs. So that was fantastic, and that's a kind of a creative loop for students who might want to partake in a gap year experience or an international exchange experience, but might need help with the funding, is to go through a study abroad program. You can also take a traditional quote unquote gap year or gap time from your college experience, but for that you would have to take a leave of absence and go back to the second option that I mentioned, find your own independent gap year program, for which you would have to pay out of pocket because your financial aid won't go with you. So the processes vary and they're a little bit different, but I want you all to know that there's no one right way to take gap time. You just need to find the way that works best for you.
Thank you, Elisabet. And
Yeah, and
I just want to make, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, I'm pointing. I realize you can't see what I'm pointing to. I'm pointing to the link in the chat that Mel just dropped. I don't know if you were talking about that, Carrie. A Gap
Um,
Association financial aid link.
yeah. So thank you, Elisabet, for sharing those resources. And as we talked earlier, and as Elisabet had mentioned, gap time can happen at a variety of times. So some of the resources Elisabet was mentioning for those who are choosing to pursue that time, maybe during a break from college or after college. For those looking at the more traditional gap time, the state exchange, the State Department Exchange website has a variety of options there, but we also we want to bring highlights to GYI's financial aid page, in which we have a variety of different scholarship options that are provided by the GYI program providers. There are links to outside scholarship entities, and we actually have a scholarship opportunity that's closing tomorrow. We extended the deadline so we could keep it open through this presentation. And that's a scholarship in partnership between Tortuga Backpacks and GYA. And so on that link, you'll find a variety of additional resources. We do have, as a membership-based association at the Gap Year Association, over 100 program providers. And so there's a few on there that are identified as having some lower cost tuition fees, and certainly we're not able to highlight each of our 100 program provider members. So that is a good starting point for finding some options that might help some to bring down some costs for gap year participation. So thank you, Elisabet. We want to move now into talking a bit more about some of the specific opportunities in terms of making a gap time more affordable. And one such option is through national service. Primarily, we want to focus today on our friends at AmeriCorps, who are celebrating their 30th anniversary. So I myself am an AmeriCorps alumna. And gosh, when I did AmeriCorps, I thought it'd been around forever, which now I'm realizing it hadn't. And I did my gap year experience in 2002, and there are just a tremendous number of ways to experience a gap year through AmeriCorps. And so, Heather, we'd like you to visit just a bit more about the specific programs that are available through the AmeriCorps NCCC program that kind of is tailored specifically for those students that are kind of at age 18, right at graduating from high school.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Carrie, so much. We are excited to be celebrating 30 years this year. It's hard to believe. I know I've been here with AmeriCorps for about 20 years of it, and it seems like we should have been around forever. A lot of people have heard of Peace Corps. Sometimes we describe AmeriCorps as kind of like the domestic Peace Corps for folks who haven't heard of us before. As you indicated with your question, AmeriCorps is a big organization. Really, the term AmeriCorps is a big umbrella that falls over hundreds of different programs. So while I'm going to talk most specifically about AmeriCorps NCCC today, because that's my question, if you're still interested in national service and what I'm saying doesn't sound like it's exactly the right fit for what you're looking for, please still check out the AmeriCorps website because there are so many other great opportunities. We have VISTA programs that help. They're more While the program I'm going to be talking about is more direct service, which is a little more hands-on. Vista is a little bit more indirect service, working directly with community organizations, helping them to learn how to work more effectively together to address poverty and poverty-related issues. There's state and national programming with large and small nonprofits all across the country. So please just know that there's lots of opportunities within AmeriCorps in general. So AmeriCorps NCCC. The NCCC stands for the National Civilian Community Corps. We are a program for 18 to 26-year-olds who want to engage in 10 months of full-time community service work. So I'll talk a little bit more about how we're structured and what that really means. So our mission statement is two-pronged, where we're looking to strengthen communities. Certainly, we're going out and we're doing these service projects, but the second half of our mission is developing leaders, where we're really looking to bring young adults into this program, put them in these experiences where they're going to be learning a lot about themselves, about their capabilities. They're going to be picking up new skill sets while they're here serving with us in the program. So that personal development piece is just as important to us in the program as the actual service that's happening in communities. Let me see, I'm going to pull up my reference here so I don't forget anything while I am running through this information. So while people are in the program, they are going to first choose one of kind of 4 sections. So we have our traditional program. This is the part of our AmeriCorps NCCC program that is 30 years old. This part of the program will allow members to have 3 to 5 different service projects in different places during that 10-month commitment. So every 6 to 12 weeks, teams will be getting a new project in a new place. Right now, I am the way that our program is structured. We have 4 regional campuses, and I'm at the one that's located in Aurora, Colorado. We are the headquarters for the Southwest region, so we have 9 states where we send our members, and it's an exciting time on campus. We actually have a new class that's starting up. I was just on campus doing some training today with our new members. They're going to get inducted on Thursday and will actually leave Friday for their first service projects. So at the beginning of NCCC, you will go to one of our 4 campuses. You'll get about 3 weeks of training, and then you and your team will pile into a 15-passenger van and begin your travel throughout the region that you've been assigned. So a little bit about the types of projects that we do. We work with Habitat for Humanity to build affordable housing. We work with community gardens and food banks to help ensure food security. We work with organizations like FEMA and the Red Cross and other disaster-related nonprofits to help with immediate but also long-term disaster recovery work. Even last year, which was I think 5 years after Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, we had teams still down there helping with rebuilding of folks' homes that were damaged by that storm. So disaster recovery really takes a long time. We work in schools and Boys and Girls Club helping to support youth programming. We work out in the environment, doing trail building and environmental restoration. So lots of different kinds of projects fall under our traditional program. So it's a really great fit for people who want an adventure in service. They're going to go different places. They're going to do different things. They're going to try something that they probably never done before, but we'll make sure that they get the training that they need to be successful. So that is one of our program elements, and that's kind of our main program under the NCCC sub umbrella of AmeriCorps. We also have something called FEMA Corps, which is structured the same way, meaning you're going to be working as a part of a team. You're going to be traveling to different projects, but all of those projects are serving with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So all of them are going to be directly related to disaster management, disaster preparedness types of projects. We have a third program that is brand new, that is super exciting, called Forest Corps. It was actually just announced a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to have our first Forest Corps class start in summer of 2024. So those applications will be opening up here in November and December for our team leaders and our members. And then the fourth element of our program I mentioned is something called Summer of Service. So it's actually a mini version of our traditional program. So rather than going out on 3 to 5 projects over the course of 10 months, Summer of Service is just what it sounds like. It's like early to mid-June through early August. It's a total commitment, usually of about 8 weeks for our members. So it's a great fit for people who are currently students, but they still want to get a little taste of what national service looks like. So that is a little bit about the NCCC program.
So Heather, what makes those programs a good option in terms of affordability and low cost? What are the actual benefits? Because AmeriCorps is, unlike many other gap-year options, folks are actually they're not paying to participate. Right. So
Yeah,
can you talk about the benefits that come with this that make it a low cost, affordable option for folks?
absolutely. And that's something that we really love about the program, is it's something that's available for anybody. While, as I mentioned, there's lots of different AmeriCorps programs. There are some that receive a living stipend, and they're kind of on their own to make that make those dollars stretch to pay rent and buy food and transportation and what they need to do. That's one unique thing about the NCCC program is everything is provided. So we're providing lodging, we are providing food, we are buying your plane tickets to get from your home of records to whichever training location you're going to, and then home again at the end of the program. We're giving you transportation out to all of your service projects. You're also going to get a small living stipend while you're in the program. It's not a lot after taxes. I think it comes out to about $150 every other week. But you're not needing to use that to pay rent and buy food and do that kind of thing because that is already provided for you. So that's more for your cell phone bill or wanting to go out to the movie with your team or save it up. We have some folks who just kind of squirrel away their living allowance and go on a great trip at the end of the program or have it to help them transition into whatever's next. And then kind of the big carrot in AmeriCorps for a full-time national service member is our education award. That is tied to the maximum Pell Grant, and so that adjusts every fiscal year if Congress adjusts the Pell Grant. This year, starting October 1st, it went to $7,395. So that can be used for either future education for somebody coming perhaps right out of high school, and doing a term of service before starting college. It can also be applied to any federally backed student loans. So if somebody has completed college or they're mid-college, they can use that to pay down that student loan debt. One other benefit while people are currently serving, for those folks who have started college and may have some student loans, we're able to put those loans in forbearance while they are serving with us. So they won't need to worry about making any payments while they are serving.
Awesome. That's a deal. That's a
It
deal.
is.
If I heard you right, your transportation of the program paid. You've got housing. You've got food. Why wouldn't someone choose this
I don't
option?
know. I think it's such a great option for everybody. And certainly, when we say housing, you're going to be living with your team. You're going to be out serving communities. So you're not going to be living in a hotel or things like that. When you're on our campus, it's kind of college dorm-esque where there's shared rooms and community bathrooms. When you're out in communities, you're going to be living in housing that is provided by the project sponsor. So it could be maybe a vacant Habitat for Humanity home that your team is sharing. It could be something like a church basement that has been donated and will provide you cots and cooking essentials and things like that. But yeah, money for food and a roof over your head will be provided throughout the course of the program.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Heather. Just want to remind folks, please feel free to utilize that chat and drop any questions in there if you have specific questions for either Elisabet on scholarship opportunities, the perspective coming from a gap year alum, or for Heather about any more of the specifics on any of those NCCC specific programs or any other AmeriCorps programs. So please drop those into the chat. And Katherine, let's hear from you. So in your experience as a gap year consultant, you've worked with a range of students who have a variety of different needs and interests. And for those students who are not interested in traveling, which is often, I think we talked earlier, there's some myths about, the gap year that you have to be traveling internationally or so for those who may not be interested in traveling, what are some cost-effective ways that you've worked with students to be able to develop productive gap years experiences locally? And for those students, if they do want to travel, if they want to have that as a component of their gap year, what types of options do you suggest for those students outside of national service?
Okay, awesome. It's great to be here, first of all. And I also want to mention that I am the mother of 4 sons. My oldest son spent his junior year of high school actually studying abroad, lived with the host family. Crazy that I let him go, but he had a wonderful experience. And my second son took a typical gap year right before college. And my third son started freshman year of college and it wasn't the right fit for him. So he took a gap year as well. So I am drinking the Kool-Aid here about the importance of gap years. And I've always been wanting students to have affordable opportunities throughout their gap time, whatever that may be. And literally, I've been in this field for nearly 10 years. And when I started, there was so much information about what you just said, Carrie, is traveling outside the US. And I was always wondering, there are so many opportunities locally. And that's really why I started this in this business of let's talk about those opportunities. So this is a perfect time for me to share that. Now, granted, I love travel. My sons all travel, but I think there's a lot to be said about what can you do on a short budget. So what I say to my students is this gap year is about the students' interests, their goals, and their budget. And there's a lot of opportunities just locally that they can do if they're creative, think out of the box, and listen to this presentation. So I will say first and foremost, I would always suggest to my students to have a part-time job. And I say that because many students in high school have never had a job. So the idea of the process of getting a job, finding the job, applying for the job, interviewing for the job, showing up on time, having a boss for the first time, all of the aspects of getting a job are real life skills. It's also a resume builder, and having a boss and really having to report to somebody, whatever that may be, is really life-changing for a lot of students. I have a student that I'll think about right now, and she was a theater student. So she spent most of her afternoons in classes, theater classes, and then in the evenings, she worked on her performances, and they had practices. She had a lot of time in the mornings. And I said to her, what about getting a job? What about working at a coffee shop? And she looked at me like I have two heads, like I've never had a job before. And I remember her mother saying, oh my gosh, I had to drag her out of bed every single morning in high school. She's not a morning person. I will say that student, I smile when I'm thinking about her because one of the best parts of her entire gap year, and she had fantastic experiences, was literally the job at the coffee shop. It's because she basically decided to do it. She made these amazing connections with all her colleagues. She loved these people that she worked with. And she also met the clients that came in, the customers. They knew her, she knew them, and she felt really purposeful. And that's sometimes what I see with students is, what is their purpose? So find a job. I say students, find a job. There's so many minimum wage jobs out there, whether it's in retail, whether it's dog walking, whatever it may be. A part-time job is a great part of a gap year plan for sure. Now, I also have students that have actually started their own companies, and I'm so proud of them. So I have a student who started a mobile car wash company. He had all the supplies. He would go to someone's house. As long as they had an outdoor spigot for him to put his hose in, he was washing their cars. That actually turned into one of his clients said, can you power wash back decks too? And he's like, yeah, I guess I could do that. Then another client says, what about painting? Do you do any painting? So before this kid understood what was happening, he started this little company. He got one of his buddies on board, and they had this wonderful company, and it just organically grew. And I'm so proud of him and what he did. One of my own sons actually worked full-time in a restaurant, and he had all weekends off. He's a big tennis player in high school. And so he started teaching tennis on weekends just to young kids, and he loved it. And then that turned into the parents that dropped the kids off would say, do you teach adults too? And before you know it, he's like has this little tennis teaching company. And all of these experiences that these kids have that are starting their own, their adventures are time management, having to deal with grown-ups, having to be organized. And I remember my son saying, well, if it rains, what do I do? And I said, I don't know, it's your problem. Like, you problem solve this, right? So just having, and I want students to think out of the box, and I want them to enjoy, what their jobs would be. I talk to students all the time about, okay, so what was your favorite class in high school? Or what was your favorite activity? And let's say a student says it was my art class. Then I'll say to them, go to your art teacher. Maybe they need an assistant in their art class, or maybe lowercase, middle school or elementary school could use an assistant. And if that doesn't work, there's so many after school programs around the country that absolutely need help. And I can let you know that little kids that are in these after school programs love the gap age student. They look up to them. And it's a nice relationship from the gap year student. They look forward to meeting the kids every day, or how many days they work. So again, doing something that the kids enjoy, art, working with, the seniors and senior centers, volunteering with art projects, music, reading to them. A lot of my students are interested, not just working, but also volunteering. It makes them feel good. For the student that is an athlete, had loved all the sports in high school, he or she, go to your lacrosse coach. Do they need an assistant? Do they need help? Again, it's doing something that you enjoy doing. If for some reason you can't, volunteer at the high school level, then there's so many youth sports out there that would love having a student work with them. So these kids can look up to, someday I'll be like them. And it's just a nice rapport that these gap year students have. There's also, you can be a referee, and there's lots of sports activities that either involve pay or whether they're just volunteer. Certifications, another big one. Students that get certified for a lifeguard. Yes, you have to invest money up front, but if you get a lifeguard job after that, it pays for itself within a matter of weeks, right? And sometimes in high school, students don't have the time to get certifications, whether it's, EMT or whether it's outdoor wilderness. Great certifications could be CPR, life-saving, right? Or first aid. So it's a great time for these students to get a certification as part of their gap year plan. Other ideas that I have, cooking. I always ask my students, do you know how to cook? And most of them are like, I don't know. Well, why don't you learn how to cook? And so I suggest to them, you can go on YouTube or you can find a recipe, go to the food store, budget what you want to spend, and come home and cook your family a meal and have it once a week. And so it's really empowering, and they're proud of themselves. They send me pictures of what they cook, right? So some students have never cooked before, and I think it's a really wonderful life skill to have. Another local option could be, I call it like explore whatever day of the week it is, whether it's Fridays or whatever day they want. Explore your city. Pretend that you are visiting your own city, because we all don't know what's going on in our cities. I live in the Boston area, and there's so much in Boston I could do, but I only do it when I have friends come to visit. So they can explore their surroundings, whether it's a beautiful hike or whether it's a cool museum. If they can, and it's offered, take public transportation, be independent, and plan it. So I have them put that in their plan. It doesn't have to cost anything. So, really all of these opportunities are completely affordable. The part that gets people hung up a little bit is putting them in a plan. When are you working? When are you volunteering? When are you taking a fun class? But none of this costs any money. And I think that's really important. To answer the second part of your question, Carrie, I would say, for the students that want to travel, probably the most abroad, probably the most affordable way to travel would be for students to basically, use their time and their skills. Maybe it's about 20 to 30 hours a week in exchange for room and board. So there are organizations, whether it's Workaway or HelpX or WOOF, there's a lot of organizations that offer these, these different types of experiences for students to be able to experience a different culture, live in a different country, live with a family, learn a new language, whatever it may be. These jobs can be working at a hostel, they can be farming, they can be restaurant, they can be being an au pair. Lots of different, experiences that it doesn't cost that much because they're giving up their time. They usually have their weekends free, but they're asked to work between 20 and 30 hours in order to get that free room and board. Now, if that is not what you want, and you do want a more structured group setting, and I say that because if you want to do one of those work exchange programs abroad, some students have never traveled on their own, right? And so they may not have the ability or the wherewithal to be that independent. Other students may have that ability. So you have to understand as a student how to go about that. When I work with students, I will go through the process of how do you vet programs? How do you want to make sure you talk to the host a couple of times over email, read reviews, and always have 2 or 3 options just in case one of your destinations doesn't work out. For the student that says they need maybe more of a structured setting, maybe a couple of mentors, they want to travel with a cohort, more like your typical structured gap year program, they have some 6-week programs versus having to spend the whole semester. And for my own students, my own kids, I actually requested that they do a structured program to start because my own students' kids had no experience traveling abroad. So in order for that to work, they had to work. So they all worked about a semester. They worked and they worked in the summer. That's what they wanted to do. And so they worked full time amongst doing other volunteer projects and other experiences, but they had to pay for the bulk of those structured programs. And they wanted to do that because that's how much they wanted to travel. So those are, some of the options, Carrie, that I think could form some in a wonderful gap time of just taking bits and pieces and putting this all in a plan. So these students know that what they're doing every week, and that's sometimes the overwhelming part of planning a gap year locally. So I think that's, probably what if I need to start my next, question, I can, but
Katherine knows she's maybe encroaching upon her time limit here and just has so much to share with us. Thank you so much, Katherine. Those were all just, an abundance of ideas, and I'm sure we're going to get some more specific questions for you during the Q&A. And so we want to save at least 10 minutes for that Q&A. So we've got a few more minutes here, but one option you didn't mention in that whole between part-time jobs and work exchange and local volunteering. You've also worked with students to pursue personal and professional growth in the form of internship opportunities. And sometimes internships, you might immediately think that that's an affordable option, but sometimes there are associated, costs that come with it. And so just kind of real quickly on this one, how have you worked with students with a range of different backgrounds to kind of reduce the costs around internship experiences and sort of the value you see in working an internship as well into the gap year time?
Sure. I do work with a lot of students that want internships, and I will say it's one of the most common questions that I get. And a lot of students they're very popular right now. And I love that they are, because it's a way for students to dip their toes into some career or some profession that they think they might like, or they really don't even know what they want to do. So I would say the most affordable way, which I go through with all of my students, really is having the students try to locate their own position. And that's hard. I'll say it right front. It is hard. But what I say to students is the most important life lesson they will learn doing this is the word and the experience called networking. And when you're in high school, there is no class that I found, and I speak at high schools all over the country, that have a class called networking. And when you go to college, there's also no class that teaches you how to network. And I also want to clarify the word network, because I also feel like when these students can take some time and put their shoulders down and start seeing everything around them for a change, when they're not in academics and not in high school or college, being friendly to people, saying hello, being curious, and asking questions and starting conversations with just people. That's networking. And it's not necessarily to get a job, but you don't know where that's going to come. So when I get down and dirty with them and like working with them, how do you go about networking? Start with your family. Get a piece of paper and write down your direct family, your family that lives in Indiana, your family that lives in California, just family members. What do they do? What are their jobs? And then start with your neighbors and starting to grow your network. I always talk about students, maybe your parents went to college, maybe they didn't, maybe your friends' parents did, but we always talk about how important that college network alum are. Well, just talk to them, have them be part of your network as far as looking for different jobs. I think that the idea of connecting to people and talking to people about their jobs is huge. First of all, it's uncomfortable for some students to talk to a stranger, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's for coffee. I always say, especially when students are home, get out of your house, go meet them for coffee now, because we can do that now. But have a pad of paper that you're using for your networking pad of paper and talk to them. It may not be the career that you want that they're doing, but they can connect you with other people. Adults love to talk about what they do, especially if they like what they do. And they're very, very impressed with students that reach out to them. So I always say to students, I don't want the parent reaching out to this contact. I want you to do that and start learning about different professions, about there's jobs that didn't even exist 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, that are now opportunities for students. So I have a student
that's
right
great.
now.
That's great advice. That's great advice, Katherine. I think you were about to share one more experience, but if we're cutting in on our final time for question and answer, but I think that you did a great job of summarizing the importance that networking piece can can bring in terms of developing internship opportunities. So thank you for that. I think Mel has been kind of monitoring the questions that have been coming in through our Q&A chat, and we want to leave this last 10 minutes with plenty of time to address some of those questions. I saw several come in regarding the NCCC questions for Heather. Mel, I'll let you kind of filter through some of those questions and see what we can accomplish here.
Yeah, Heather's been typing away in the Q&A. A lot of questions have been coming in about AmeriCorps opportunities, so you all can see some of her responses in the Q&A. And maybe we can circle back to some of those as well. But just a question for all of you, anyone who feels like they can chime in on this. I'll just start with this question from one attendee who has a high school student graduating at age 17, asking about gap year options for those under age 18, if anyone has ideas.
I would say one thing with NCCC, while we do have 18 as our minimum age on the day that people actually start the program, we have a lot of people who are 17 when they apply, or they're starting the beginning of their selection process. One of the questions that I mentioned, that I answered in the Q&A, was about kind of when AmeriCorps works and if you have to miss more than one school year to participate. And we actually have 3 different start cycles. We have a summer start cycle that starts around June, goes till about March. There's a fall start cycle, which is the one we're starting now, which is October till about the following July, and then a winter start cycle, which is typically February to Thanksgiving timeframe. So depending upon when the 17-year-old is graduating from high school, if they're turning 18 later that summer, they could still potentially participate in NCCC with our fall start. Which wouldn't be until October. So they would have a little bit of time to get that birthday in before they actually would travel to campus to begin. And there may be some great other opportunities other folks would like to chime in on as well.
I can talk about jobs or part-time work or internships. A lot of internships, you might have to be 18. It depends on the individual companies. But everything that I spoke about tonight, you don't necessarily have to be 18 to do these local jobs. I know if a student does choose to do a gap year program, some of them will take 17-year-olds as long as they've graduated from high school as well. So there'll be many opportunities for a 17-year-old.
Yes, and I was just browsing here at the different programs offered by the U.S. Department of State, or those that are federally funded. Most of them typically are there's a high school age range. And I believe for those, the students have to be enrolled in high school. But for more specifications about those, you would have to go and look on the individual pages. And since there's a couple of different options, I wasn't able to go ahead and check. But if you're interested in checking those out, I would just double check the requirements for those. And always inquire as well. Heather mentioned that some people start applying for the AmeriCorps programs when they're 17. I know personally from a program that makes exceptions to age requirements. It really depends on the program and I guess the reasons for the age requirements. Most of them come down to legal reasons, but I would always inquire directly.
Thanks, everyone. Katherine, I'm going to direct this next question to you. There was a question that came in asking about if you know of any online templates or other resources you would point to for parents hoping to start the conversation about interests, goals, and budgets with their students.
As far as online templates, I will have to say I do not know off the top of my head. I have the template in my head. But it's really just asking, and what are you interested in doing? And I have to say now, versus 5 years ago, in general, don't panic, because a lot of students are a little bit more blah than they used to be. They don't know. And I don't expect students to know exactly what they want to do. But just suggesting, I would say parents just start suggesting ideas, and there will be something that the light bulb will go off, but also having different opportunities. You may like something, you may not. And I find when students choose to do something that they don't like, well, that's good. So they know they don't like it, but they wouldn't have known if they hadn't tried. So I think the idea of having many different experiences in their gap time is really, really important.
I would mention a good online resource, and Mel, perhaps you can drop this one in the chat for starting that conversation. For the question that came in, is the Gap Year Association does have a free gap year planning guide, which can be downloaded from a link Mel will drop in there. And that guide was really built in consultation with a lot of different GYA members. Predominantly a lot of gap year consultants like Katherine. She represents one of just 7 accredited gap year consultants. And so in that guide, you'll see kind of some guiding questions and considerations that students ought to be thinking about when they're, considering a gap year in terms of kind of the outcomes they want to get out of it and the budget piece and all. So I think that's a great online resource for folks to check out.
Great. I'm going to move on to one other question specifically for you, Heather. Does AmeriCorps accept high functioning people with autism? Wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
That's a great question. So as part of our selection process, all of our members will go through a medical screening. So a condition like autism is something that they would want to self-disclose on there. I would say that it probably depends. We do need for all of our members to be able to, to work independently. So they're going to be living in a communal setting. So whether that is a good fit for their particular situation may vary depending upon the individual. There's going to be a lot of change and travel. We look for our members to be, able to be moving around, sometimes with very short notice, depending upon what the needs are, if there's a disaster that needs to be responded to. So I think that, the way that the question was phrased, high functioning, I think it's definitely possible. I think that, that's something that you would want to discuss with our medical nurse who talks to all of our incoming members about their individual situations.
Great. Thanks, Heather. And Heather, I'm also just wondering, there were so many questions that you were answering and typing kind of during the conversation earlier. I'm wondering if there were any that stood out to you that you'd like to revisit. There were a couple about eligibility for a Pell Grant and whether or not the Education Award affected that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that for the broader audience.
Yeah, I think that was a great question too. And I think that I don't want to misspeak here, but it's my understanding that while our Education Award value is tied to the Pell Grant, I don't believe that using an Education Award disqualifies somebody from a Pell Grant that they would otherwise be eligible for. So again, I don't consider myself an expert in that area, and I would want somebody to, verify that before counting on it. But that is my understanding of that situation.
Thank you.
I also saw we have a parent of a currently serving member who's here with us in Aurora right now, one of our members who's getting ready to be inducted and roll out on Friday morning, which is super exciting.
Great, thanks, Heather. And we are getting a few more questions rolling in, and we're also quickly closing in on the end of our time together. And so I'm wondering to our panelists if you feel comfortable sharing your contact information in the chat. There have been several requests coming in to reach out individually. If you feel comfortable with that, you can feel free to do so. I also just want to drop in the chat one more time a link to the Gap Year Association's financial aid webpage, which has a lot of information about scholarships, other types of financial assistance for a variety of different gap year options and opportunities. At the top of this page, there are also details available and a link available to the application for our gap year scholarship. The application deadline is tomorrow. So for any prospective gap year students out there hoping to plan a gap year experience in 2024, we would love to see a scholarship application come in from them. So that information is available. Carrie, any last words before we wrap up our time here?
No, thank you all. I just want to thank all of our panelists and thanks for the folks who tuned in today. We appreciate your interest in the gap year option, and whether you're a student, a parent, a high school guidance counselor, college administrator. Ultimately, we just hope that you leave tonight feeling confident that taking an intentional gap year is worthwhile and meaningful and affordable. An affordable way to spend time before pursuing higher education or a traditional career path. So thank you all. Please take advantage of the resources that were in the chat tonight. And as the panelists said, you're more than welcome to reach out to continue the conversation. So we look forward to connecting with you all in the future. And thanks for tuning in, everyone.